the Alpha King found the Omega unconscious, and a letter exposed her hidden truth. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the dark forests below, while the sea roared endlessly against the rocks. The wind carried whispers of secrets long buried, and even the strongest men avoided the forest after sunset. Kalen, the Alpha King, rode alone along the northern borders of his realm. His black cloak clung to him as the rain fell in thick sheets, soaking the golden embroidery of his armor. He was a man of power, feared by his enemies and respected by his people. His kingdom thrived under his strict rule, yet he bore a loneliness that not even the grandest halls or the finest feasts could erase. The king's horse stumbled over a slick stone, and Kalen tightened his grip on the reins. That was when he saw her, a figure lying at the edge of the forest. She was almost hidden by the rain, her body small and fragile against the dark earth. Something about her presence stopped him in his tracks. She seemed unnatural. Vulnerable, yet carrying a strange strength even in unconsciousness. Kalen dismounted swiftly. Rain soaked his hair and dripped into his eyes, but he didn't care. As he knelt beside her, he noticed the letter clutched tightly in her hand. The paper was soaked, ink running with the rain, but she refused to let go. Her fingers were pale and trembling, yet her grip was strong. "Who are you?" Kalen asked, his voice low, but the storm swallowed the words. She didn't answer. Her chest rose and fell slowly. She was alive but barely conscious. Kalen's instincts told him she had been running, perhaps hiding from something or someone. He pulled her into his arms and lifted her with surprising ease. The weight of her seemed almost symbolic, as if he had found something fragile yet important, something that belonged to the shadows. By the time he reached his fortress, the obsidian keep, the rain had stopped. The fortress loomed tall, its dark stones glistening from the storm, towers reaching like blackened spears into the night sky. Kalen's guards hesitated when they saw him carrying the woman. No one dared question him. Even in a kingdom ruled by law, the king's word was absolute. Inside the keep, the great hall smelled of fire and old stone. Servants scurried quietly, their eyes wide at the sight of the woman. She was laid on a soft bed in the infirmary, wrapped in blankets. Kalen didn't leave her side. "Who are you?" he asked again, kneeling beside the bed. Her eyelids fluttered and she stirred. Her voice was a whisper, weak but filled with a strange determination. "They cannot know who I am or what I carry," she said. Then her head fell back and she drifted into unconsciousness again. Kalen frowned, his brow furrowing. Her words were a riddle, but he did not ignore them. The letter in her hand had fallen onto the bed beside her. He picked it up carefully, brushing his fingers over the wet paper. The ink had blurred, but he could make out fragments, mentions of heritage, of a curse, of danger. Whatever secrets she carried, they were important enough for her to risk death to keep them hidden. The night stretched on. Kalen sat in silence, staring at the fire while the woman slept. There was something about her that unsettled him. She was not just a lost traveler or a common thief. She carried an aura that spoke of destiny, of power. And yet, she was terrified. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a quiet calm over the keep. The first rays of sunlight fell on her face as she opened her eyes. Kalen was still there, watching her. His presence was commanding, yet not threatening. "You are awake," he said simply. Her gaze met his, wide and searching. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, each measuring the other. She saw the strength in him, but also the loneliness behind his dark eyes. Kalen saw her fear, but also the flicker of defiance that refused to break. I need to go," she said, her voice stronger than before, though still soft. Kalen shook his head. "Not until I understand why you were out there. Who sent you? Why did you run?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the letter again. Something held her back. Secrets weighed heavy on her chest, and she knew that revealing them could change everything. Her life, his kingdom, perhaps even the balance of power in the realm. "They will find me," she whispered finally. If they know I am here, if they know my blood, it will bring ruin. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who they were. He already sensed the danger surrounding her. Something ancient, something dark, moved just beyond the edges of the forest. He had felt it before, the way the shadows seemed alive, watching, waiting. And now this woman was tied to it in some way. "You are under my protection," he said, firm. "Whether you like it or not, no one will harm you while you are in my keep. Do you understand?" She looked at him, her eyes searching for a hint of deception but found none. Slowly she nodded, though a part of her still feared the chains that came with his protection. Kaelin's offer was not an invitation, it was an order. But in the way he said it, she sensed something else. A promise, not just of safety but of understanding. Days passed. The woman, whose name she eventually revealed as Leora, began to regain her strength. She walked the halls cautiously, aware of every shadow and every whisper. Servants watched her with curiosity and fear, for they had heard rumors of the king's unusual new guest. She carried herself with quiet dignity, refusing to let her circumstances define her. Kaelin, meanwhile, observed her constantly. He had never encountered anyone like her, someone so vulnerable yet so unyielding. He saw her read books in the library with fierce concentration, pacing in the gardens under the moonlight, and he watched her from a distance, struggling with feelings he could neither name nor control. One evening he found her standing by the window, looking out at the dark forest beyond the keep. Her hair was wet from the evening rain, and the candlelight cast shadows across her face. "You are thinking of leaving," he said softly, stepping beside her. She didn't turn to him. "I have to. They will not stop searching. They will come for me." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "Then let them come. I will not allow anyone to take you, not while I breathe." Her heart skipped. The words were simple, yet their weight pressed against her chest. He did not ask for gratitude, nor did he offer false comfort. He simply stated a truth that left no room for argument. And in that truth, Leora felt something stir, a trust she had not known she could afford. That night, the wind howled around the keep. Leora clutched the letter she had tried so hard to hide. The words on the page blurred in the candlelight, but the message was clear. Her heritage was not ordinary, and the curse tied to her bloodline was older and darker than she could have imagined. She shivered, torn between fear and the strange comfort of Kaelin's protection. He had found her when she was at her weakest, and yet he did not treat her as weak. He saw her as she was meant to be, strong, vital, and necessary. But even in that quiet moment, the shadows outside the walls whispered of danger. Leora could hear them, faint and menacing. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she carried. Kaelin knocked gently on the door to her chamber. She opened it slightly, wary of intrusion, but he only stepped inside and stood silently. "You cannot face this alone," he said finally. "Not the curse, not the enemies, not even your own fears. But together, perhaps we can." Her lips parted, but no words came. She did not yet trust him fully, not with her secrets, not with her life. And yet she sensed a shift, a beginning of something she had never experienced before. A bond, fragile but undeniable, forming in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. As the candlelight flickered, casting their shadows across the stone walls, Leora and Kaelin stood in silence. Outside, the forest stirred, and somewhere in its depths, a presence watched, waiting for the moment to strike. For the first time since her arrival, Leora allowed herself a thought she dared not speak. Perhaps she was not entirely alone in this world. Perhaps, in the Alpha King who had found her, she had glimpsed a kindred spirit. And yet the letter still burned in her pocket, heavy with truth and danger, and the storm outside was far from over. The night deepened. Shadows crept closer to the keep. And in the stillness, a single, quiet thought echoed in both their minds. The world had shifted, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The sun rose slowly over the obsidian keep, casting golden light over the dark stone walls. Inside, the halls were quiet, save for the soft steps of servants and the occasional clatter of armor from the guards. But in the heart of the fortress, tension hung thicker than the morning mist. Leora moved carefully through the corridors, her bare feet silent on the polished floors. The keep was vast, with twisting halls, tall towers, and hidden passages that seemed to hold memories of centuries. She had begun to learn their paths, to avoid being seen by servants who whispered when they thought no one could hear. But still, she could not shake the feeling of being watched, not by the guards, nor by the servants, but by the king himself. Kalen had not left her side completely since she awoke. He was not always present, but she could feel his gaze on her, steady and unyielding. It was a presence that both unsettled and comforted her, a constant reminder of the control he held over the keep and over her life. "You move as if the stones themselves will betray you," Kalen said one afternoon, appearing beside her silently in the library. His cloak trailed over the floor, dark against the lighter stone, and his eyes were fixed on her with a mixture of curiosity and quiet command. Leora stiffened. I just do not want to cause trouble," she replied, glancing down at her hands. "Trouble is inevitable," Kalen said, his voice calm but firm. "You cannot hide forever, Leora, not from me and not from them." She hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing her face. You read the letter." Kalen's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. "Yes, I read it. You thought I would ignore it. Do you know how dangerous it is to carry such secrets?" Leora's lips trembled. She had hoped he would not read it, had hoped that the words she had fought to protect would remain hers alone. But now they were exposed, and the weight of that truth pressed heavily on her chest. "I had no choice," she whispered. "If they find me, if they discover my bloodline, they will destroy everything." Kalen studied her silently, the firelight from the hearth casting shadows across his sharp features. He did not speak, but his silence was enough to make her heart race. It was not anger in his eyes, but something else, something she could not yet name. Protection, yes, but also curiosity and perhaps a growing understanding of her strength. Days turned into nights, and the rhythm of the keep continued. Leora learned to move among the servants, to speak without revealing too much, and to mask the powers within her that she barely understood herself. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she felt a spark of energy flow through her hands, a pulse of something ancient and untamed. She had always been careful, but the closer she grew to Kalen, the harder it became to hide her true nature. One evening, the wind carried a chill through the open windows of the tower. Leora stood there, gazing out at the forest beyond the walls. Trees swayed violently, and shadows seemed to dance across the ground like living creatures. She felt a shiver of fear, not for herself, but for the people who had nothing to defend them against the darkness that sought her. "You should not stand there alone," Kalen said, appearing behind her as if he had been part of the shadows themselves. She turned to him, startled. You can appear without warning." "I am the king," he replied simply, "and as long as you are in this keep, I am bound to you. Do not mistake my silence for neglect." His words were both comforting and suffocating. She wanted to run, to be free from the weight of his protection, yet she knew that outside these walls, she was nothing but a target. Her bloodline was a secret that could not remain hidden forever, and every day brought new dangers she could not face alone. "You fear them," Kalen said softly, reading her thoughts as if they were his own. "I do," Leora admitted. "I have never been safe, not truly, and now even here I feel it." Kalen stepped closer, the warmth of his presence filling the space between them. "Fear is natural, but it will not control you, not while I am here." Leora wanted to believe him, but the shadows in the forest whispered of dangers she could not name. That night, she hid the letter under her pillow, the words etched into her mind as clearly as if they were carved in stone. Her heart beat rapidly as she thought of the secrets it held, the curse that lingered in her blood, and the men and women who would stop at nothing to possess her. The days that followed were tense. Strange noises came from the forests, howls, rustling branches, and the occasional flash of movement that vanished before she could focus on it. Kaelin assigned guards to patrol the perimeter, yet even their numbers did not ease her anxiety. She could feel the shadows gathering, waiting, testing her defenses. One night, as she walked through the garden beneath the moonlight, she felt a presence behind her. She turned sharply, but there was no one there. Only the wind, whispering through the trees. "Do not fear the shadows," a voice said softly behind her. She jumped, spinning around to find Kaelin standing in the darkness, his expression unreadable. "How did you?" "I have been watching," he interrupted. "Not to frighten you, but to protect you. You cannot face this world alone, Leora. You have power, yes, but even power has its limits." She looked down, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. She could not face the dangers of her bloodline alone, and yet trusting him was harder than she imagined. He was the king, a man of strength and command, and she feared that giving him access to her secrets would make her vulnerable in ways she could not control. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. Kaelin's gaze softened, though it did not lose its intensity. "Because I do not like seeing someone who matters to me in danger, and because you are not like others who come to this keep. You are different, and I need to understand why." Her heart thudded in her chest. Different. He did not say she was weak, nor did he treat her as a threat. Yet the weight of his words pressed on her. For the first time in her life, someone seemed to see her, truly see her, and the thought was both terrifying and comforting. Days turned into weeks. Leora trained in secret, learning to control the strange energies that coursed through her. Kaelin observed from a distance, offering guidance only when necessary, and never pressuring her beyond her limits. Their interactions became a careful dance, words unspoken, glances that lingered too long, moments of understanding that needed no explanation. But the shadows in the forest did not rest. One evening, a sudden scream echoed through the keep, chilling the hearts of everyone within its walls. Leora froze, recognizing the sound as unnatural, a creature not of this world, something drawn to her bloodline. Kaelin's hand found hers, gripping it tightly. "Stay close to me," he ordered, his voice low and commanding. The tension in his body was palpable, and she realized that he, too, feared what was approaching. Together they ran through the corridors, the castle alive with the sounds of panic. Guards rushed to their positions, weapons drawn, but even their presence could not stop the unseen threat. Leora's heart pounded as she clutched the letter to her chest, knowing that the words within it held a power that could either save them or doom them. They reached the tower and Kaelin barred the door. For a moment, silence fell, a calm before the storm. Then the walls of the keep trembled as something massive moved outside, unseen but terrifying. "We must face it," Kaelin said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Whatever comes for you, we will meet it together." Leora swallowed hard, feeling fear and determination collide within her. She had been running her whole life, hiding from a destiny she did not understand. But now, with the king at her side, she realized that perhaps she did not have to run anymore. Perhaps, for the first time, she could face the shadows and stand her ground. The wind howled around the tower, and the darkness outside seemed alive. Leora pressed the letter to her chest, feeling the weight of her secret and the power within it. Kaelin's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise that he would not let her face the danger alone. And in that moment, amidst the fear and the unknown, Leora felt something stir within her, a courage she had never known, and a bond with Kaelin that was stronger than any fear. The shadows waited, patient and menacing, but for the first time, Leora did not feel entirely alone. And as the moonlight spilled into the tower, casting long, flickering shadows, she realized that her life, and the kingdom itself, was about to change forever. The night held its breath, and in the silence, the unspoken truth between them lingered. The danger had only just begun, and neither of them would emerge unchanged. The sun had not yet risen when Leora awoke to a quiet hum in the air. The room felt charged, as if every stone of the tower pulsed with a silent energy. She sat up slowly, her fingers brushing over the letter hidden beneath her pillow. Its words seemed to thrum against her skin, and she felt an inexplicable pull, a whisper of the power that ran through her blood. Kalen had already left the room, though she could sense his presence lingering in the halls, in the shadows outside her door. He had been watching her more closely in recent days, offering guidance, testing her abilities, and sometimes simply standing near, silent, commanding. His patience was not the patience of a king toward a subject. It was different. He saw her not as weak or dangerous, but as someone vital, someone whose secrets mattered to him in ways he did not yet understand. She rose, feeling the morning chill on her bare arms. Her steps were careful as she moved to the window. Outside, the forest stirred with life, yet something darker lingered among the trees. She could feel it, a presence patient and waiting, drawn to her lineage, drawn to the curse that had shadowed her family for generations. Footsteps behind her made her turn. Kalen's face appeared in the doorway, calm, composed, yet intense. "You are restless," he said. She hesitated. "I feel something, the forest, it calls to me." Kalen's eyes narrowed slightly. "It has always called you, even before you knew why. That is why you run, why you hide, but hiding will not save you." She swallowed, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. He was right. She could not run forever. Her bloodline was tied to a destiny she did not fully understand, a destiny that was beginning to reveal itself in ways she could no longer ignore. "Then what should I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kalen stepped closer, the warmth of his presence grounding her. "Learn to control it. Do not fear your power, Leora. Fear is a trap, one your enemies will use if you show weakness. But mastery will give you freedom, even in chains." She looked at him, confusion and longing mingling in her gaze. His words were not gentle, nor were they harsh. They were simply the truth, spoken without artifice. And in that truth she felt both fear and hope, as if a path had opened before her, leading into the unknown. Over the next days, Kalen guided her through the control of her power. The castle became their training ground, the empty halls echoing with whispers and energy as Leora struggled to harness what had always been within her. She stumbled at first, sparks of energy escaping her hands, leaving traces on the stone floors, startling servants and guards alike. But Kalen's patience never faltered. He offered instruction, correction, and when necessary, protection. "You are stronger than you know," he said one evening as they stood in the garden under the pale moonlight. "Do not doubt yourself. The curse that binds you is powerful, yes, but so are you, and it listens when you command it." Her hands shook, the energy pulsing through her like a living thing. "It feels like it could consume me." "Then do not resist entirely," Kalen advised. "Let it flow through you, shape it. Fear will only give it strength." Leora's heart pounded. He was not just teaching her to control her power. He was teaching her to trust herself, to trust him, and, perhaps unintentionally, to trust the bond that was forming between them. She wanted to push him away, to keep her secrets and her fears locked inside. Yet every time he spoke, every time his hand rested near hers, she felt a connection she could not ignore. The nights grew longer, and with them came the shadows. One evening, a scream echoed from the forest beyond the keep. Leora froze, recognizing the sound as unnatural, filled with malice. The air around her crackled and she felt a pull in her chest, a force urging her to act. Kalen was at her side instantly. "Stay close," he commanded, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Whatever is coming for you, we face it together." Together, they moved through the halls, their steps synchronized as though instinct guided them. The guards were ready, weapons drawn, but even their strength could not stand against the unseen threat. Leora's pulse raced as she felt the energy of the forest pressing against the walls, seeking her, testing her, drawing out the curse she had fought to control. "Now," Kalen whispered, his voice steady. "Focus." She closed her eyes, letting the energy flow through her. Sparks of light shimmered along her arms, coiling like living threads. The shadows outside recoiled, as if sensing the power awakening within her. For the first time, she did not feel fear. She felt control. She felt strength. A monstrous figure emerged from the trees, dark and shifting, its eyes glowing with a hunger that chilled her to the bone. But Leora stood her ground. Kaelin's hand found hers, grounding her, lending her strength she had not known she possessed. "Together," he said, and in that single word she understood the depth of their bond. Energy surged from her, striking the creature. It howled, recoiling from the force she had commanded, and then slowly it dissolved into mist. The forest fell silent, as if holding its breath, and Leora's knees trembled from the exertion. Kaelin's hand remained in hers, steady, warm, and unyielding. "You did well," he said softly. "Do you understand now? You are not alone in this." Her chest heaved, the adrenaline leaving her weak but exhilarated. For the first time she felt a spark of hope. She had faced the shadows, and with Kaelin by her side she had survived. Yet even in victory she could not ignore the truth. The curse within her was alive, aware, and far from fully revealed. The letter she carried, the secrets she had hidden, were not just warnings. They were keys to understanding her destiny. And Kaelin, he now knew more than she had intended. That night they stood on the balcony of the tower, overlooking the moonlit forest. The air was still, but tension lingered. She looked at him, searching for a sign, a hint of what he thought of her powers, her secrets, and the bond forming between them. "You trust me," he said, almost as a statement, not a question. I want to," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But my blood, my heritage, it is dangerous. If anyone knew," Kaelin turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering focus. "Then let me help you bear that danger. You are not meant to carry it alone, Leora, and neither am I." Her heart thudded. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that she could feel in her bones. In that moment, she understood something profound. Trust was not weakness. It was strength, and in allowing herself to trust him, she could face the shadows, the curse, and the truths of her lineage. Days passed, and the bond between them grew. Leora began to rely on Kaelin not just for protection, but for guidance, for understanding, for the quiet presence that reassured her when the world seemed too dark. And Kaelin, he found himself thinking of her constantly, not just as someone to protect, but as someone who had awakened something within him, a vulnerability, a longing, a need for connection he had not allowed himself to feel for decades. But peace was fleeting. One evening, as they trained in the courtyard under the fading light, a messenger arrived, breathless and pale. "My king," he gasped. "The forests, there are others. They know she is here. They are coming." Leora felt her stomach tighten. The threat she had felt for weeks was no longer distant. It was real, approaching the keep with intent. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling the weight of her secrets and the urgency of the moment. Kaelin's hand found hers once more, and for the first time the unspoken bond between them carried not just trust, but an understanding of mutual survival. "We will face them," he said quietly, his eyes blazing with determination. "Together." The sun dipped below the horizon and darkness spread across the keep. Shadows lengthened, and the wind whispered through the towers, carrying secrets and threats alike. Leora knew that her life and the kingdom itself was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. And in that charged silence, she realized something she had never admitted aloud. She was no longer afraid, not entirely. With Kaelin by her side, she could face the curse, the shadows, and the truths of her lineage. But even as she held his hand, she could feel the tension between them, a spark of longing that neither dared name. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken words and unseen threats, and in the depths of the forest, eyes glowed, waiting, patient, and relentless. For Leora and Kaelin, the transformation had begun, not just of her powers, but of their bond, their understanding, and the destiny that awaited them. The curse was alive. The shadows were restless. And the journey to face both was only just beginning. The storm arrived without warning. Dark clouds rolled across the skies above the obsidian keep, thunder echoing like the roar of ancient gods. Rain lashed against the stone walls, and the wind howled through the towers, carrying whispers of the forest's unrest. Leora stood at the balcony, her hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes scanning the horizon. She could feel the curse within her, alive and thrumming, a force that demanded release. Its power had grown over the weeks, stronger with every encounter with the shadows in the forest. Now it pulsed like a heartbeat in her veins, dangerous yet undeniable. She pressed the letter to her chest. The words that had once been secrets now seemed like keys to the destiny she could no longer avoid. Kalen approached silently, his cloak flapping in the wind. His presence was steady, unshakable, as though the storm itself would yield before him. "It has begun," he said quietly. "The forces that seek you are here. They will not leave until they have claimed what they believe is theirs." Leora turned to him, her eyes wide, not with fear but with determination. "I am ready," she said. "If this power is part of me, I must face it. I cannot hide anymore." Kalen's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability in his dark eyes. "You will not face it alone. We face it together, as I promised." The wind carried a shriek from the forest, and the shadows surged, twisting and moving with unnatural speed. Dark forms emerged from the trees, creatures not entirely of this world, their glowing eyes fixed on Leora. She could feel the curse reacting to them, pulling at her, urging her to unleash the power within her. Kalen drew his sword, the steel glinting even in the dark storm. "Stay close," he said. His voice was firm, commanding, yet beneath it was trust, an unspoken bond that gave her courage. The first shadow lunged, faster than the eye could follow. Leora felt her hands glow with energy, sparks of light dancing across her skin. She focused, letting the power flow through her, shaping it, controlling it. The shadow shrieked and dissipated, leaving only mist behind. Kalen moved with precision, striking at the remaining creatures with calm efficiency. Yet they came relentlessly, more than either of them had faced before. The forest itself seemed to stir, lending its shadows to the attackers. Leora felt a surge of panic, but Kalen's hand on hers grounded her. "Trust yourself," he urged. "Trust the power within you. And trust me." She drew a deep breath and let the curse within her awaken fully. Light flowed through her, bright and fierce, illuminating the courtyard even under the storm's shadow. The creatures recoiled, their forms flickering and distorting in the glow of her power. For the first time she realized the depth of her heritage, the strength that had always been hers. The battle raged for hours. Rain poured, lightning split the sky, and the clash of magic and steel filled the air. Leora and Kalen moved as one, a team forged by necessity, trust, and the growing bond between them. Every attack, every strike, every surge of energy drew them closer, their reliance on each other absolute. Yet, amidst the chaos, the curse tested her. Shadows from within her own bloodline rose, manifestations of fear, guilt, and past sins. They whispered doubts, threatening to break her resolve. She faltered for a moment, a spark of hesitation threatening to undo everything. Kalen caught her by the shoulders, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are not alone," he shouted over the storm. "I am here, always here. Do you understand?" She nodded, the words grounding her. With a roar that echoed through the storm, she released the energy, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a force of liberation. The shadows from the forest screamed, the curse's manifestations dissipated, and a calm settled over the courtyard. The storm's fury remained, but the darkness that sought to consume them had been defeated for now. Kalen lowered his sword, his chest heaving from exertion. Leora sank to her knees, trembling, drained by the intensity of the battle. He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "You did it," he said softly. "You controlled it. You are stronger than anyone could have imagined. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear but from relief, from the weight of what she had carried and finally faced. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of the curse, afraid of myself, afraid of losing control. Kalen shook his head, his thumb brushing gently over her hand. Fear does not define you. Strength does. Courage does, and today you proved both. For a long moment, they simply held hands, the storm raging around them, yet their own world feeling calm, sacred, and separate. In that silence, Leora realized something she had never allowed herself to admit. She had come to rely on him, to trust him, to care for him in a way that went beyond gratitude or necessity. Kalen's gaze lingered on her face, intense, unreadable. Leora, he began, but paused as if weighing his words against the storm. You are remarkable, not because of your power, but because of who you are. And he stopped, the words unspoken, heavy in the air. Leora's heart pounded, the tension between them electric, charged not by the storm, but by the bond that had formed in fire, rain, and shadow. Before the moment could stretch further, a new movement in the forest caught their attention. The creatures were gone, but something else lingered, eyes glowing, watching, calculating. Leora felt a shiver, the curse within her pulsing once more, as if sensing another trial approaching. Kalen tightened his grip on her hand. No matter what comes next, he said, his voice resolute, we face it together. I will not let you stand alone. And in that promise, Leora found a clarity she had never known. The curse was part of her, yes, but so was her courage, her determination, and her bond with Kalen. Together they were no longer prey, no longer powerless. They were a force, united against the shadows that sought to claim her. The night passed, and with the first light of dawn, the storm began to ease. The forest was quiet, still trembling from the unleashed energies of the previous night. Leora and Kalen stood on the balcony of the tower, looking over the kingdom. It was a new day, but she knew that challenges would come again. The curse would always be part of her, the shadows would always linger, and danger would never truly vanish. Yet something fundamental had changed. She was no longer afraid, not in the same way. The bond she shared with Kalen, forged in fire and fear, had given her strength beyond the curse. She had faced the darkness, controlled it, and survived. And in doing so, she had discovered her own courage, her own power, and her own heart. Kalen's hand found hers once more. Leora, he said softly, you have changed more than you know. And so have I. I see you now for who you are, not for what you carry. And this time he did not stop. He leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching, his gaze locked on hers. I will always stand with you. Not as your king, but as someone who cares for you completely. Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, joy, and something deeper she had never dared name. She leaned into him slightly, their hands intertwined, and whispered, and I trust you. I trust you completely. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting gold across the walls of the keep. For a moment, the kingdom felt at peace, as if the storm had purged not only the darkness outside, but the doubts and fears within them both. The letter remained in her hand, its words still heavy with prophecy and warning. But now, she understood that she did not have to face the truths of her bloodline alone. Kalen's presence, his guidance, and his unwavering trust had given her the courage to step fully into her destiny. The shadows in the forest may have watched, waiting for the next moment to strike, but Leora no longer felt powerless. With Kalen by her side, she was ready to meet whatever came, not with fear but with strength, determination, and love. As they stood together, overlooking the kingdom that had been shaped by their trials, Leora realized something she had never imagined. Redemption was possible, even for a cursed bloodline, even for those who had carried shadows for generations. And sometimes it was the bond between two souls, the trust, the courage, the shared strength, that could transform not only themselves but the world around them. Kalen's hand tightened around hers, and for the first time she allowed herself to smile fully, without fear. The shadows may remain, the curse may endure, but together they could face anything. And in the quiet dawn, with the kingdom stretching beneath them, the Alpha King and the Omega stood side by side, not as ruler and subject, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and the promise of a shared future, one they would shape together, no matter what darkness still lingered beyond the walls. The forest whispered, but Leora no longer flinched. She had faced the storm, the shadows, and the curse, and emerged stronger than ever. And as the first rays of sunlight touched their faces, she realized with a calm certainty, this was only the beginning.